So now we're moving into masters of vibration. So this is really the purpose of our existence, right? We're here to become masters of vibration. It's with the understanding that we are in a universe, right? A universe. That means one verse inside of the multiverse. This universe is based on vibration. Vibration is oscillation. Vibration is good, bad, left, right, male, female, right? So we're here to understand polarity. Polarity is vibration. Once we master vibration, we can then leave this universe, go into another universe, and we have the understanding and the capability to utilize that vibration in that universe. This here is the Great Year, or the Platonic Year. In Hinduism, they call them the Yugas. In Greek mythology, they call it the Ages. And in Greco-Roman, they call it the precession of the equinox. As you can see here, you have the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. And then on the other side, the Iron, Bronze, Silver, and Gold. When we come into this universe, we come in as pure beings into the Golden Age. And then we descend down in consciousness, move into the Iron Age, where we completely forget who we are. And then we start the Ascension process, where we start moving back up, okay? So you have your descending, 13,000 years, and then your ascending, 13,000 years, which gives you your 26,000 years, or the precession of the equinox, or the Great Year. Let's look at a quick explanation of the precession of the equinox.
Now, of the many astrological, astronomical metaphors in the Bible, one of the most important has to do with the ages. Throughout the scriptures, there are numerous references to the age. In order to understand this, we need to be familiar with a phenomenon known as the precession of the equinoxes. The ancient Egyptians, along with cultures long before them, recognized that approximately every 2150 years, the sunrise on the morning of the spring equinox would occur in a different sign of the zodiac. This has to do with a slow, angular wobble that the Earth maintains as it rotates on its axis. It is called a precession because the constellations go backwards rather than through the normal yearly cycle. The amount of time it takes for the precession to go through all 12 signs is roughly 25,765 years. This is also called the Great Year, and ancient societies were very aware of this, and they referred to each 2150-year period as an age. From 4300 BC to 2150 BC, it was the age of Taurus, the bull. From 2150 BC to 1 AD, it was the age of Aries, the ram. And from 1 AD to 2150 AD, it is the age of Pisces, the age we are still in to this day. And in and around 2150, we will enter the new age, the age of Aquarius.
So I feel like that was a fantastic explanation of how the precession of the equinox works. We're going to get more into that, but now let's move on to density charts. So we're talking about gold, silver, bronze, and iron age, right? Now let's take a look at the ages. The golden age, the silver age, the bronze age, the iron age. What are we talking about? Why are they using metals such as gold, silver, bronze, and iron? What we're talking about is density. Remember I was talking earlier about we're going to go over density? Well, looking at density here, we're talking about density of our physical being and the environment around us. So in the golden age, we are far less dense than we are in the iron age, meaning that we're able to live longer. We're able to experience light in a completely different way. And then as we transition down into the silver age, we then become more dense, where our lives aren't as long and we have less access to higher information. Then we move down into the bronze age, where we become even more dense. Then down into the iron age. The iron age is where we completely forget who we are. We are so dense that we have completely forgotten where we come from and where we're headed, because we are in the densest part of our existence. So we have descended here down throughout the ages. So when we look at gold, gold is 19.32 grams per cubic centimeter. Then you have silver is 10.5 grams, and then bronze is 8.9 grams, and then iron is 7.8 grams, okay? So you can see that the density moving from the golden age to the iron age. And what that means for us is vibrational frequency. So I have a little vibrational frequency chart here. As we're down in the iron age, the vibrations are much slower, meaning reality is more dense. And as we move higher and higher in the ascension process, the information, the energy gets faster and faster, higher and higher. And when it's faster and higher, it gives us the ability to experience life in a different way. So what the precession of the equinox is talking about is the gestation of the soul, right? So when you come in, you are coming in as a pure being. You are then descending in consciousness, and then you are going to start ascending in consciousness. So you forget who you are, and then you start to remember who you are. All for the experience of learning and understanding polarity, of understanding vibration. So the gestation of the soul takes between 24 to 26,000 years. You will have so many lives inside of this great year, right? You'll come in as a male, a female, different ethnicities, different colors. You're going to experience it all in all fashions, because you are here to become a master of light essence. The soul's gestation is a fractal of the human gestation, right? So the gestation of the soul is a fractal of the human gestation. So it takes 24 to 26,000 years, and the gestation of the human body takes between 260 to 280 days. So you can see the similarities there. What we're looking at here is vibration, right? Oscillation, good, bad, light, dark, awake, sleep, day, night, right? So you have your descending and your ascending. We come in at this point here and we start to descend in consciousness. We come in the golden age and we descend down into the silver age, the bronze age, into the iron age. And then we start to wake up in the iron age, moving into the bronze age, silver, and then gold, and then we return to singularity, our point of entry, with the experiences that we have gained going through night and day, ascension and descension. So now from a polarity standpoint, on the awakened side, you have good, heaven, advantages, strengths, pros, supporting, virtue, highs, opportunities, gains, reasons, benefits, positives, ups, assets, highlights. And on the dark side, or the asleep side, you have bad, evil, hell, disadvantages, weaknesses, cons, opposing, shortcomings, lows, obstacles, losses, against, negatives, downs, liabilities, and challenges. So you can see all of these are going to shape how we experience our reality. So as we're descending, we're going through all this loss, and as we're ascending, we're going through all these gains, meaning we're losing consciousness here and we're gaining consciousness here. We're going back to our truth, okay? So looking at it from a seasonal point of view, we move into the fall, right? We come in, we start to fall in consciousness. Then we move into winter, where we're dead to the understanding of who and what we are. Then we move into our spring point in our consciousness, where we're starting to wake up, we're starting to bloom, we're starting to remember. And then we move into our summer, where we're in full bloom, understanding everything that we have come here to experience. Then we move into the 0 point and we return. So now as we come in to this existence here at this point, right, we're coming in from angelhood, right? We are angels at this point. We're coming in here to have this experience where we can descend in consciousness to gain experience of polarity, right? So we are come from a very high point of understanding, a very high consciousness. And we then descend down in consciousness, right? What's happening here is we are falling from grace. So we are then the fallen angels, right? We come from the angelic realms into this experience, then we descend in consciousness, and as we're descending in consciousness, we're falling from grace. We're forgetting who we are and where we come from. One of the things I never understood when I was growing up, when I was a kid, they'd say, oh, you're born into sin. And I would say, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. How can we be born into sin, right? We're born from God. There's no sin in God. God is all that is. And then I come to understand later on in life that to live in sin involves straying from the path, is failure, being in error, missing the mark. We are straying from the path. We're straying from our understanding of who and what we are, descending down in consciousness that we completely forget who we are, and then we start to ascend in consciousness where we start to remember who we are. So as we're starting to descend, some of the things that happen to us is we come in here as a 12-stranded DNA being, and then we're manipulated down to a 2-stranded DNA being, meaning they're removing some of the codons for us to be able to receive information that's around us. This is why we can only see within the narrow band of the visible light spectrum. If we had all 12 strands of DNA activated, we'd be able to see the full band of the electromagnetic spectrum. But instead, we can only see in this very, very narrow band. Another thing that happens is the calcification of the pineal gland. The calcification of the pineal gland means that we lose our third eye capability to be able to see into the spirit realms, right? So as we're transcending down here, we lose our connection to the higher realms. And then once we get here, we completely forget who we are. Now we have made the transition where we are now in the ascension process. So now looking at it from this point of view, now looking back at these diagrams, it gives a good understanding of why we can only see 0.4% of the stars, etc., and that our conscious mind is only 5%, and that our ability to see is within this very narrow band of the visible light spectrum, because we're only working with a two-stranded DNA being. Science says that 99% of our DNA is junk DNA. That's because they don't understand. Remember, we're just coming out of the Iron Age, where we have completely lost our memory of what we are. It is not junk DNA, it's just turned off. So now with that understanding of the descension and us falling from grace and forgetting who we are, now these pie charts are starting to make sense. Looking at what science thinks our reality is, it's just 0.4% stars, and the other stuff is what we can't see. And then looking at our conscious thinking is only 5%, and that our ability to see is only within the visible light spectrum. And then you look at the DNA of the human genome, they say that 97 to 98% of our DNA is junk DNA. It's not junk DNA, it's just turned off. So once we start turning on these DNAs within inside of us, we're going to gain far more access to the electromagnetic spectrum, giving us the ability to see in other realms. Once our third eye is decalcified, we can then start seeing more. So once we get this DNA turned on and our third eye decalcified, as we are awakening, we'll be able to see more in these realms. Just like those plants that we're speaking, we have the ability to tap into that if we have our transmitters turned on within inside of us that can perceive that information. So in that video I showed you before about the precession of the equinox, he was talking about moving into the next age in years to come. But actually, there's so much discrepancy with our calendars and our time that have changed over the past 2,000 to 3,000 years that we really don't know exactly when this is going to happen, okay? So what we're looking at is, this is a good guesstimation of where we are in the precession of the equinox. So what we're looking at here is we're right here and we're looking up. And as we look up and over, we're coming out of the age of Pisces and moving into the age of Aquarius, okay? So wherever we're at on this chart here, we're looking above. So whatever up here is going to be the sky that we're seeing. So we came in at the golden age, okay? And we started to descend in consciousness, right? So in this little time frame here, we were at a very high level and then we started to fall, okay? So Atlantis happened in the golden age. The first pyramid wars in the sinking of Atlantis is thought to be 10,000 BC, okay? That also correlates to the Great Flood in the Bible. So what the Great Flood did is it removed the previous cycle's information, meaning it erased everything from the golden age, because we came in at a very high consciousness. We came in at the golden age and then we started to descend down. So how do you take a being who is from the golden age, who has all knowledge, and bring them down into the belly of unconsciousness? You have to make them forget. So what happens is the Great Flood was the wash that allowed us to wipe clean the slate so that we can have a brand new experience for this cycle. Now there's going to be multiple cycles that go on. So once we complete our cycle, a new cycle starts, new souls come in, and they take their journey in the understanding of vibrational frequencies. New evidence suggests that the Giza pyramids and the Sphinx are much older based on water erosion on the Sphinx and the layout and the orientation of the Sphinx, as they were direct reflections of the constellation in Leo in 10,500 BC. Furthermore, it was at this time in 10,500 BC that the Giza pyramids were in direct reflection of the Orion constellation. The Nile River was a direct reflection of the Milky Way. So you can see here, so remember when we're here, we're looking across, and this would be the constellation or the age that is, okay? So when we're looking at this age, it's the age of Leo in direct reflection to the Sphinx and the Giza Plateau and the Giza pyramids. After the sinking of Atlantis, it was 3,500 years till the first civilization showed up. It was somewhere around 8,000 BC that people found the concept of agriculture and slowly started to domesticate animals for both the purposes of food as well as assisting in agriculture. People had already been creating art much before then, but it was part of the human culture, not a human civilization. So now looking at the history from current academia, it's stated that the Sumerian civilization was the first civilization, right? And that was between 4500 BC and 1900 BC. And that started in the Silver Age. And then we're moving into Mesopotamian civilization, which was pretty much all of the Bronze Age, between 3500 BC and 500 BC. And then we had the Indus Valley, also in the Bronze Age, between 3300 and 1900 BC. And then you had the ancient Egyptian civilization starting 31 BC, which is directly on the beginning of the Bronze Age. And the fall of the ancient Egyptian civilization was 2686 BC. Then the ancient Greek civilization, also in the Bronze Age, 2700 BC to 1500 BC. And then the Mayan civilization is in the Bronze Age into the Iron Age, 2600 BC to 900 AD. The Babylonian, also in the Bronze Age, between 2300 to 539 BC. And then you have the Roman Empire starting almost exactly when the Iron Age started, between 753 BC to 480 BC. So this is where the consciousness of mankind has dipped so low. The Persian Empire, also in the Iron Age. Vedic astrology was revealed about 5,000 years ago by holy Indian sages in India, and was from its beginning perfect, eternally valid, and holy. Thus, in their opinion, culture was not developed in terms of a progression upward development, as Westerners believe, but was established at the beginning of time by divine beings in highest perfection, and since then has only deteriorated. So as you can see, all the civilizations that have come in our history have all fallen because they have fallen inside of the descension process. So everything that came from the descension process has to fall away. So everything was born holy and has descended down in consciousness. So here we go. Let's get into the avatars now, right? So the avatar, Krishna, came in at 3227 BC, right in the transition from the Silver Age into the Bronze Age. And what's happening here is these avatars are coming in to show us what we're capable of. Remember, in the Golden Age, everybody has these abilities, but we have forgotten because we have been descending down in consciousness. And as we descend down, we forget. So these avatars are set to remind us of our true potential. At 3000 BC, in the beginning of the Bronze Age, you have Horus, the sun god of Egypt. And then 1391 BC, late in the Bronze Age, Moses comes along. In 623 BC, Siddhartha, Buddha, comes in at the beginning of the Iron Age to help us remember, to help us get through this time of darkness. And then in the current calendar year 0, Jesus comes in the heart of the Iron Age. So we have all these avatars coming in to remind us of our capabilities in these dark ages. Remember, we've been descending in darkness, meaning we have been forgetting who we are as we're transitioning down. Then we get into the belly of the Iron Age, iron being the densest material, meaning our ability to perceive the reality is so dense. You ever meet someone and say, hey, that person's really dense? Well, what are you talking about? They just don't get it, right? Because we are in the Iron Age. We're all dense. We're all very materialistic. So now let's look at Jesus, right? Jesus and the age of Pisces, right? So Jesus is here looking up at the age. You can see we're moving into the age of Pisces. As we move over here in time, we're moving from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. So Jesus is the beginning of the age of Pisces. And remember from the precession video, this is why Jesus is associated with the fish, the age of Pisces. Alright, so now let's get into some history, and you can see how we started to completely forget and remove all the records of our history. So you have the burning of the Library of Alexandria in 48 BC. We're in the dead center of the descension in the Iron Age. This is where all of our ancient texts and all the information of all of our cultures before were held. So all that information is gone, erased from our memories. Now that we don't have the ability to tap into the higher realms at this point in time, all of our tradition and culture is completely lost. The Royal Library of Alexandria, or Ancient Library of Alexandria in Alexandria, Egypt, was one of the largest and most significant libraries of the ancient world. The burning of the Library of Alexandria included incalculable loss of ancient works, has become a symbol of the irretrievable loss of public knowledge. So all of the ancient traditions that go back beyond the Sumerian times were in this library and completely lost to our civilization. And now we think, oh well, Atlantis didn't exist, the Mu civilization didn't exist. None of this existed because we have no proof. All we have left is fables and stories of a time long forgotten. Now, moving further into the Iron Age, between 1059 and 1291, we have the 200 years Crusades, the religious wars, where a total of estimated lives lost was 300,000. Not only were these lives lost, but all other texts that was out there were pillaged and taken into the Vatican. So all this information that's been out there, so they have the burning of Alexandria, then you have all these other cultures that are out there being converted into Christianity, and all of the information that they had about their culture before that was taken or burned. So we have lost so much information in the Iron Age. As we're moving out of the Iron Age in the 14th to 17th century, we have a 300-year Black Plague, where a total estimated lives lost were 75 to 200 million people. Think about that. All this pillaging and death inside of the Iron Age, showing us that we have completely forgot who we are, where we come from, and the true meaning of our existence. But this is all done on purpose. There really is no right or wrong. We're here for the experience. So the Iron Age is designed for this experience. And then in 1492, inside of the Iron Age, Columbus found America. And then right on the transition of the Iron Age into the Bronze Age, from 1861 to 2011, 151 years, there have been 7 major wars where a total estimated lives lost 96,249,000 lives lost in 150 years as we're transitioning out of the Iron Age into the Bronze Age. And then another war we don't hear too much about is the Native American War that started right at the end of the Iron Age and right at the beginning of the Bronze Age. It was a 300-year war. We don't know the exact number of people killed in the Americas. There was no one back in the time of Columbus compiling a census or doing a mass survey. However, a death toll of 100 million figure has been documented by author D.E. Standard, author of the American Holocaust. So we're talking 100 million lives lost. That's more lives than the previous slide's 7 major wars. It's an astronomical amount of lives lost, and yet that's not in the history books. But you can see that from the Bronze Age, Iron Age, into the Bronze Age, there has been a lot of deceit, death, disparity, disease, all these things to bring humanity down, 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 as we have hit the belly of the descension process. But the good news is we are starting the awakening process. Also, at the end of the Iron Age, you have Nicholas Copernicus, who theorized the heliocentric model in the early 1500s. And then you have Galileo Galilei. Galileo made his first telescope in 1609, modeled after a 1608 telescope that could magnify objects 3 times. He created a telescope later, that same year, that could magnify objects 20 times. Then at the beginning of the Bronze Age, in 1946 to 1947, you had Operation High Jump. 1947, Roswell UFO incident. And then between 1945 and 1959, you had Operation Paperclip, was a secret program of the Joint Alliance Objective Agency, largely carried out by special agents of the armed CIC, in which more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians, such as Wernher von Braun and his V-2 rocket team, were recruited in post-Nazi Germany and taken to the United States for government employment, primarily between 1945 and 1959. Many were former members and some were former leaders of the Nazi Party. The primary purpose of Operation Paperclip was US military advantages into the space race. I feel NASA's greatest accomplishment were the moon landings. There have been 6 manned US moon landings within a 3-year span between 1969 and 1972. But unfortunately, we have not been back to the moon since because we have lost the technology to do so.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
There's not much more I can say about that. That's just interesting. 1962, you have Operation Fishbowl. So now let's start looking at the bright side of things. So now we're moving into the Ascension Bronze Age. You have 1760 to 1840. The Industrial Revolution completely changed the face of how we get around and experience our reality. And then, the father of the 21st century, between 1856 and 1943, Nikola Tesla, brings us all this amazing technology that we have today and we're still utilizing. Then you have 1900 to 1990, 90 years, a technology boom. Sound, film, and televisions invented in 1923, the silicon chip invented in 1958, email invented in 1971, internet and the personal computer 1973, mobile phones 1973, and World Wide Web invented in 1990. This 90-year technology boom completely changed the face of communication, of how we see and experience the world around us. So the age of Aquarius, we're moving from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. The approximated dates for entering the age of Aquarius range from 1447 AD to 3597 AD. So what we're looking at here is age of Aquarius is the age of information, right? The age of disclosure. It's bringing out what hasn't been known before, right? So everything that we forgot, we're starting to remember now. So we're starting the ascension process now, right? So we're starting to wake up, and the age of Aquarius is associated with information, right? Information, remembering, starting to gain our memory of who we are, where we come from, what we can do. And then we have December 21st, 2012, was one of the biggest turning points in our soul's evolution thus far. It marked the end of the Descension and the Dark Ages and opened the door for a new dawn to usher in the Ascension. If you remember, there was so much negativity around the 2012 mark, that the world's coming to an end and all this stuff is going to happen. But what was happening is the old world, the Descension process was and did come to an end. We moved into a new age, a new shift in the Ascension now. So we moved from descending, from darkness into light, and now we're in the Ascension process. So for the next 13,000 years, we are now in the upswing of remembering in our evolution process. 1960s, the hippies. Originally a youth movement that began in the United States during the mid-60s and spread to other countries around the world. This is when spirituality really started coming in and people started getting in tune with themselves and their bodies, and all this amazing things started happening in the 60s. 1960 to 1970, the Indigo Children. The Indigo first started to appear in the late 1950s. Although most were born in the 1960s and 1970s, one thing they often have in common is that their parents were the hippie generation, the first live and let live adults, the parents who gave their children more freedom than previous generations. This is why I think there were waves of star children prior to the Indigos. Each generation paves the way for the next. 1970s, the New Age movement. The New Age is a term applied to a range of spiritual or religious beliefs and practice that developed in the Western nations during the 1970s. August 16th through the 17th, 1987, Harmonic Convergence was one of the world's first global synchronized meditation events. This event also closely coincided with the exceptional alignment of the planets in our solar system. So you can see the upshift is already starting to occur. We're already starting to move into the awakening process. People are waking up to what they're eating, to what they're watching, to what they're doing. People are starting to awaken, and it's going to only grow and grow and grow because we are now in the shift of the ascension. The descension is over and we are in the ascension. Although there still are remnants from the old descension process, the old paradigm, but it will die off as we start to move into the light. Because once we move into the light, the darkness no longer has a hold, right? You can't bring darkness into a lit room, but you can bring a lit candle into a dark room and have an effect. So now fast forward all the way to the age of graduation, the age of Libra. So we're going to be here looking this way, and we're going to be looking at the age of Libra, okay? So what's happening is from this point to this point, we will be graduating, moving back into our godhood, right? So we're moving back into our angelic realms, and we're gaining mastery over vibration and polarity. And we're going to be able to take that experiences into our other universes and express that experience. But looking at Libra, Libra holds scales, right? So what's interesting about this, the Egyptians viewed the heart as the seat of the intellect and the emotions. As such, it played a certain role in the rebirth of an individual in the afterlife. The heart of the individual was weighed against the feather, representing the goddess of truth, Mat, in the judgment process, overseen by Osiris, the lord of the underworld. This will give you an idea of where the statement light-hearted came from. To be light-hearted means you're light in your heart, and you're forgiving, you're loving, and you're compassionate, and you have no hatred or negativity inside of your heart weighing you down. So we have taken this journey of descending and ascending. So now what we're looking at here is creation, right? Creation is our experience as we move down, descending, and up, ascending, moving through high vibrations to low vibrations, back to higher vibrations. It's all about the experience. Wealth is the sum of the things you have that money can't buy and that death can't take. That is true wealth. And as we have these experiences, this wealth is gaining to our oversoul, our soul's experience, giving us the experience of understanding how to become masters of light, polarity, vibration. Light and dark and everything in between. We are here to be masters of light vibration. Understanding this, know that we are in the upshift now, and everything that's negative is going to start falling away as long as we don't give it our attention. Don't give it your attention anymore. Only give your attention to that which promotes love, light, and prosperity. And with that, thank you for joining me for lesson 3, and I'll see you on lesson 4.